I've been really looking forward to this because we've been talking throughout the day about what it's like in workplaces, how we work in workplaces, how we can improve workplaces. But of course, at the core of it is this basic question of what's actually going on inside our heads while we're at work. And you've spent your entire career studying not only how do we understand our brains, but how do we understand how to influence our brains in ways that we might not even recognize. And of course, if we're spending a lot of time at work, that has an influence in that. So for all of us, if we're thinking about our brain at work, what's the most important things we need to know about how we cognate when we're in a work setting?
Yeah, so I wrote a book some years ago called Incognito, which is about
it's a great book.
Thanks. Which is about all the unconscious processing that we do. It had overlap with your book, The Power of Habit. I mean, these are talking about the same stuff. What I'm interested in now is what is all the flexible stuff that the brain does? What's all the stuff that's not automatized, but that's totally required for running a company? So cognitive flexibility. So what does it mean to innovate and to come up with new things? And it turns out the more I chewed on this, the more I realized that, this is, although it's a small part of what the brain does, it is the most important part when it comes to, for example, running any sort of innovative company. And it's actually something we see across the animal kingdom. Animals have this trade-off between exploiting the knowledge they have and exploring new territory. So it's called the exploitation-exploration trade-off. And all animals do. So if you know to forage under the red rocks, you'll exploit that knowledge, but you'll also forage under the blue rocks and the green rocks, and you'll spend some fraction of your time exploring. And it turns out that exploration part is absolutely key to what good companies do. So what it looks like is, companies spend some fraction of their time exploring lots of options. I mean, by this I mean good companies that are doing it the right way, exploring lots of options. So, we all. I run a neuroscience lab, but I've got 2 companies now, so I've really gotten to explore this world more. We've all got our core competency, what we're good at, but what's the most important thing is to keep generating lots of options. So, just as an example. Yeah, just as an example, Thomas Edison, whenever he presented a problem to somebody in his lab, would say, okay, I want you to solve this thing and come back with 10 answers. And that is a super useful thing to do. So I stole this idea, I use it in my lab too, because the brain always wants to take the path of least resistance. So just as an example, let's say I ask you guys to picture standing on a beach at sunset. So, go ahead and picture standing on a beach at sunset. Okay, so how many of you added the white foam tips of the breaking waves? Okay, nobody. How about swimmers in the water? How about the crescent moon in the sky? How about some, coconut husks on the beach? Okay, super impoverished, right? And this is the key.
Turns out all of us are uninnovative. You're very...
The key is that when I ask you to think about standing on a beach at sunset, your brain takes the path of least resistance from sand to water, and there you are, and that's it. But everything else is in there. I mean, the way the brain works is by association. So everything is associated with everything else. So, if I ask you to think about rabbit, that's associated with every book you've read about rabbits, Watership Down or whatever, Jessica Rabbit and Easter eggs, and what rabbit tastes like. Like all that stuff is physically connected in your brain. It's what's called an associative neural network. So the question is, why is it so hard for you to access that very rich, florid network when I ask you to stand on a beach at sunset? And the answer is this issue that the brain takes the path of least resistance because it is most efficient. And evolutionarily, if you're hungry, you go eat. You don't dance or paint or something like that. And so that's why the brain's really good at it. The key to creative thinking, to innovation, is to distrust the first answer and send it back. Send the answer back so you're getting something else out of that rich network that's already in there.
That's fascinating. So let me ask, so in an age of potential information overload, right? How many people are certain that you have gotten more emails just sitting in this room than you can possibly deal with this evening, right? A number of hands go up. So in this age of information overload where my instinct is not only to find the easiest solution, but not to send it back, right? I want to get something that's just satisfying to the query. How do I cognitively figure out how to divvy up what I should send back and do more work on, and what is good enough and I can get onto the next task.
I think this is the idea behind, let's say, Google 10% or 20% time, is this idea of, look, the requirements of our jobs require us to just do our stuff, to exploit our knowledge, what we're good at. But the idea of having this extra time where you do something really outside the box is just as important. But it's a different kind of test. So when it comes to emails, you want to satisfy. So you want to do it as quickly as you can to get it off. But you need to set aside that time where you're generating lots of options for things. And not only generating lots of options, but also scouting to different distances. Look, every company that's successful has this sort of thing where they're doing stuff that's close to the bone, where they're saying, okay, look, this is our core competency, but they're also trying out different things at very different distances.
Force the greater cognition.
Yeah, well, actually, I would say the greater cognition is what gives them the ideas to do that. But the idea is, a smart company is going to say, look, what we need to do is generate lots of options at different distances and try these. And some of them will fail, and some of them will work colossally well. And predicting the future is really hard.
Yeah.
And so a good company just says, I'm going to try things at all different distances, and I'm going to see what works. So I was just at Google this morning, just a few hours ago. And they're a search engine. That's what they do. But just look at the things that they've done. Contact lenses to read your health, and self-driving cars, and so on. They're going to all different distances. Now, many of those will fail, and that's totally okay. That's just the way it goes. Many of the ideas will tank. Google has so many things. I was thinking about this morning. There was Google Lively. There was Google Video, which was a competitor to YouTube. There was Google Buzz. There were all these things that we don't even hear of anymore.
Google Plus, which still exists today, and how many people have a Google Plus account?
Yeah, exactly. So, but that's okay, because what that demonstrates is that they're proliferating options like crazy, and several of them, maybe perhaps most of them, will die, and that's fine, because whenever they have a hit, that really hits.
So let's talk about how to systematize this. I'm just curious, how many people in the audience, a number of CEOs, how many people have a system in their life where they systematize taking time to do exactly this, to think about things beyond kind of the bare minimum that you have to? Okay, a number of people.
Oh, great.
Terrific. And when I was reporting for this book I just wrote, one of the chapters is about Disney and the making of Frozen. And one of the things that Frozen was actually falling apart, right? They were about to come out with the movie, totally on the rocks. They thought that they couldn't bring the movie together. And they have this system, the Pixar system that was imported into Disney, where they did two things. And I'm wondering if there's evidence for this in the research that you've done. First of all, they have this system where they say you have to take unlike things and mash them together, right? What if we had, instead of a prince and a princess, what if we had two sisters that save each other? Try and figure out how to resolve that tension. Then the other thing that they do is they create uncertainty. So they took a writer and they made her a co-director, in part because they just wanted everyone to kind of get very anxious about what that actually meant. Same people at the table, but now they have different titles, and nobody knew how to resolve the tension, and they had to resolve the tension in part by having this creative breakthrough.
Yeah.
What is the role of tension in prompting our brain to actually do something new?
It gets us off the path of least resistance. It puts us in a place where we have to come up with something new. The problem that anybody has who's a CEO is that you find where things are working, and things are working well there, and all of your intuition is to just systematize it, to automatize that so it stays working, because that's your goal, and that's exactly how companies die off. The really good companies are the ones that are constantly reinventing themselves. I just stumbled on this RCA, which made televisions. RCA stands for Radio Corporation of America. That's how they started, and they ended up, when the television technology came along, reinventing themselves and so on. So that's really useful. As far as the Pixar thing goes, that your intuition is exactly right. That has a basis in the neuroscience, because essentially there are three things that are happening under the hood,
okay,
which allow us to take in the world and food process it and spit out something new. And very high level talking about this, it's bending, breaking, and blending. And this is what brains are so good at doing. We take in the world and we crunch things and we blend them like the princess and the prince and we break them and we spit out new ideas. Now, so just this morning I was at Google and they're talking about all their neural network stuff. And what struck me is, they've got all this data that comes into the neural networks, and they're just accepting the world as is and essentially codifying it. And you can get amazing things out of that. But that ain't what humans are doing. What humans are doing is taking stuff in and making new versions of it constantly. That's what we do. That's what creativity and innovation is about, and that's what was going on at Pixar, where they said, all right, take this and smash them together.
So let me ask you about, when I was in college and we would talk about this, before the age of understanding the brain so well, the professors would talk about eustress and distress, right? That eustress is the thing, it's a type of stress that makes me feel like I can create something new, I can innovate. Distress is the thing that bogs me down and doesn't let me sleep at night, or makes me wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning. I also have children that do that, so there's a little bit of a balance there. But let me ask, if we're trying to train our employees to embrace eustress, but we're trying to teach them how to avoid distress, because we know that that's going to cut down on productivity, it's going to freak people out. Yeah. What do we know about creating an environment that does one and not the other?
It's hard to do that. It's hard to always make sure that it's good stress instead of bad stress. But I think, here's my opinion, and this is my next book is on this issue about creativity and how we do innovation. I think that making change the norm is a very important part of it. So just take as an example the open office plans. Everyone loves the open office plan. It wasn't that way if you look at historical pictures some decades ago, and it gets all kinds of play about how great this is. Well, it's just, I think, starting to hit its peak, and it's going to go down. People are complaining about how noisy it is, and everyone catches a cold, and blah, blah, blah. And it's going to, and what happens is, every 5 or 10 years, consultants get called in to design an office plan, and they switch something up. And what happens is, on this very long period, like a 30-year period, where stuff is just, it's changing, and that's okay, because the important part is to have the change involved, because that switches everything up. So just out of curiosity, who's wearing a watch here? Who's wearing a watch? Okay, so what I'd like you to do is take your watch off and put it on the other hand for the rest of the day. Okay, this is a very simple thing.
I'm not even sure I can do that.
Okay, I want to see you guys do it too, yeah. So what this does is it breaks us out of our habit in a little way, where every time you look at your watch, oh yeah, okay, now this automatized behavior, I can't rely on that anymore. It forces you to use your brain a little bit. You can do this, for those of you who aren't wearing a watch tonight, brush your teeth with your other hand. It's a very minor thing, or one thing I try to do is drive a different route home from work every day, because I can take a different route home. First of all, time doesn't shrink down to zero. I'm not telling you how to live longer, I'm telling you how to make it seem as though you lived longer. And anyway, all these things are easy ways to just identify and break out of our automation. Same thing with switching up the office plan, or switching up whatever, switching up the seating at the board meeting, whatever it is, switching up titles. These are easy ways to hit the right balance of exploration and exploitation.
But let me ask about that, because there's this fetishization almost of efficiency over the last 20 years, right? One of the things that the internet does so well and computers do so well is they take these tasks that are kind of dull and mundane, and they make them more efficient for us, and we get all this time to think about other stuff, and which is fantastic. If I put my watch on this wrist, if I take the different route home, it gives some novelty to my life, but it's super inefficient, right? I like driving the same route home because I don't have to think about driving. I can instead think about, what I'm going to cook for dinner, or the meeting I have the next day. How much novelty do we add into a life or a day? Because it's easy to say more novelty, change where your watch is, but we're all in settings where we have to be efficient.
Yeah, so this is the balance between exploration and exploitation that all animals have to hit. And this is why I think Google, with their free time, and other companies that do similar things, that's the idea, is the huge majority of the time, be efficient. Be as efficient as you can be. But then set aside this other time where you're just totally creative, where you come up with stuff that's new, and that's the balance. There's no better way to get the exploration and the exploitation in your life, but to sort of set aside time for both. By the way, this thing you mentioned about how efficient we've become, I don't know that that's true. I mean, with email and everything, I feel like we're all much busier than we ever were. Just as a side note, I mean, I see people in the audience tapping away on their emails and so on. It's just, it's become overwhelming.
It's a good question. How many people actually feel like they're more efficient now than their parents were? Not some people.
So more efficient, I buy that. But how many people feel like you have more free time than your parents did?
No one.
Oh, okay.
One person. One guy.
The guy with the busy parents.
Two positions.
Okay.
Two positions. I thought Silicon Valley was the place where we all come because we get to bike ride every afternoon and we have all the free time on Earth. Apparently not. You guys are working as hard as I do in New York. That's terrible.
Yeah, that's something I've been wondering a lot about.
So why are we addicted to that though? Why are we addicted? This exploration versus exploitation, right? I want to explore. I became a journalist. All of us went into these industries because we want to spend our time thinking about big, important things and changing the world, and not just exploiting the basic skills that spending all of our time replying to emails. How do we create work settings that retrain ourselves and our employees to explore rather than exploit?
To have some exploration rather than exploitation is what you want. And one has to just be very conscious of this because it's so easy to say, look, here's our core competency, this is what we're good at, this is what we're doing. And you set up your office and you set up your thing, and we're all subject to that trap. It's this issue about the unconscious mind being ruthlessly efficient. And I was impressed at the number of CEOs that raised their hands saying that they set aside time to do something new because the question is how much time are you setting aside? But it's amazing that you're even setting aside any time because a lot of people don't do that. They find what they're good at and they stick with it.
And let me ask, for the people who raised their hand before, how many of you actually end up using the time you set aside not to get caught up on emails, but to actually do the work? That's great. That's
great. Good. Okay.
So let's go to questions. If anyone has any questions, we'd love to take it. And while we're waiting for that question, I wanted to ask this other question, which is that one of the things that I've been reading a lot about is this cognitive need for closure, right? The need to feel productive as opposed to be productive. Because feeling productive gives us a sense of reward, of satisfaction. Exploring, creating some new Google thing that doesn't actually end up finding an audience, that can feel very unsatisfying, right?
Yeah.
What do we know about the neurology of reward that we can create environments that encourage people to fail without getting burned emotionally by that experience?
Yeah, very good question. I mean, one issue is just setting up an environment where risk is cultivated. That's part of the environment because, just recently I was looking at the history of flight, and the number of failures is colossal on that. Before the Wright brothers came along and got their fixed-wing aircraft, but even their technology was replaced very quickly, like 3 years later. So setting up an environment where you're cultivating fearlessness in the face of error is a big part of it. Now, every company has their needs. They have to spend some time exploiting, getting what they're good at. But setting up this other time or just this culture where you can try and fail and that gets rewarded. You're rewarding risk. It's absolutely critical to getting
And how does that reward have to manage? Does it have to actually be some type of literal reward where if I give myself a piece of chocolate every time I fail, am I going to be more cool with failure?
Reward for humans is this very abstract concept. Essentially, first of all, you can't punish it. If somebody's really tried something way out and they're doing a great, they're trying, even if it fails, that's something that cannot be punished would be the baseline. And then on top of that, if there's some sort of reward or recognition for trying, that's really useful. It does not need to be something like a primary reward like chocolate.
It can be. So what should it be? Is it someone just patting me on the back saying that's okay? Is that enough of a reward?
That's somewhere near the baseline of what's required, and that's fine. That's enough. But if you cultivate this culture, which is genuine, which genuinely rewards risk and says, hey, you know what, that didn't work out, but that was a really good try. You really tried that and it worked. It didn't work.
That's interesting. Hey, questions from the audience? Yes, sir. We'll bring a mic over to you.
Hi, I'm Peter Miskowicz from JLL. I've been meditating for the last 10 years, and I find mindfulness as a means of management in an accelerating, complex work environment and work lifestyle imbalance. What are your thoughts on the cognitive benefits of mindfulness, and what would be your advice in terms of how we might employ that as a tool?
Yeah, I mean, it's great. I'm I'm one of those people who's too busy to meditate, which gets everyone to tell me that I'm the guy who needs to meditate because it's something that's just recently made an entree into neuroscience. So for a long time, it was viewed as just some thing that people do. But then neuroscientists really started studying it, looking at meditation and what happens in the brain. Essentially, it's it has to do with this turning inward issue. So normally, we're constantly monitoring the world. We're looking for everything and bing, and especially now with our phones and our computers and so on. And with mindfulness meditation, there's this turning inward where you can get a lot done that way, which is, I know, not the point, because getting stuff done, but you get stuff done in a different way, I should say, where you're processing what's happened and so on. It's a great idea. And ask me in a year from now, maybe I will have started that. Yeah.
Anyone else? Let me ask.
There's a question over here.
Yeah.
Hi, Laura Uses. I'm the CEO and founder of a software company, Context Engines. You mentioned at the beginning that our brain works through connections, that we connect information to other pieces of information. How does that fit with our mobile environments, our device environments with all of the apps? Do you see that as a positive or negative?
As a positive or negative? Is that what it is? Boy, that's a complicated question. What this little rectangle in our hand gives us is access to the rest of the world. So it allows us to pull up information a lot more quickly. It's already been shown that kids of the next generation are just much faster at accessing information, whatever they need. So, for all of us, we're about the same age, right?
Yeah.
Charles and I both grew up in Albuquerque, it turns out.
Anyone else from Albuquerque? It's a great city. And nobody works there. We all get kickoff at 4:30. Everyone goes home. There's no email. It's amazing.
Yes. I completely forgot why I brought up Albuquerque. Why did I bring up Albuquerque?
Oh, our brains on devices.
Yeah. I still don't remember why I brought it up. But here's the thing. It's already been shown that kids of the next generation, look, we all had what we called just in case knowledge taught to us. So just in case you ever need to know when the battle of such and such was, it was in 1066, and blah, blah, okay. But kids now, it's a lot more just-in-time education, where as soon as they're curious about something, they look it up. And that's actually better, believe it or not, because they have the right cocktail of neurotransmitters present to have that stick, because they're curious about something, and so when they see it, it sticks, the knowledge. Whereas we had to slog through the Battle of Hastings and so on. So, anyway, I think that the mobile device isn't just our connectivity in general. I happen to be on the side of the cyber optimists. I think that's probably a good thing, and it allows us to make more connections as we're going.
So one last question. Does that mean you have two young? I have a 7-year-old, a 4-year-old. You have a
4-year-old and a 7-month-old.
7-month-old. So the fact that you're actually awake right now is amazing. So you're just getting into this with my children. Literally, I cannot keep them away from screens.
Yeah.
It sounds like, should I be cool with that? Like, go as much Dora as you want. Which me and my wife would not mind, to be totally honest. We refer to Dora time as mommy and daddy juice time, usually in the evening. And we felt very guilty about it. But is it okay?
You know what? Nobody knows the answer to this. My general feeling is that some of the educational games are extraordinary, and the next generation is going to be a lot smarter than we are, just because of the stuff they can access and the speed at which they can learn the alphabet and drawing and any kind of information. Probably it is useful for them also to be doing things like physical exercise and so on. So that calls for a limitation. Calls for a limitation on the screen time. But I think when done right, some of these apps are extraordinary. It's adaptive education that's tailored right for the user of the experience, for the user of the app. And it trains them in a way that no teacher in a classroom can possibly do.
I feel so much. I'm going to start referring to it as David Eagleman time and when we get home. Thank you so much, David. Really appreciate it.
Great. Thank you, guys.